Welcome to the 2GIG Edge Power Up video. Today we're going to show you how to properly wire up the 2GIG Edge panel. As you can see, we already have some of our materials present. We have our wire, we have our 2GIG Edge panel, as well as our 2GIG transformer. And some of the required tools. We have a Phillips screwdriver, as well as a very small flathead. Now you do need a pretty small flathead screwdriver needed in order to do the terminals on the back of the edge panel. So make sure you have that beforehand. Okay. Also, we've gone ahead and stripped our wire and prepped it to make it nice and easy. This is just 22 gauge. I personally like 18 if I can, but if you are going to do 22 gauge, we do recommend doubling up in pairs for each of the terminals. Okay, so we've gone ahead and stripped our wires to prepare for this. Now, most edge panels will have a screw port at the bottom and top of the panel. In later models, you'll only see just the bottom screw. Okay, so just be aware of that when trying to take off your back plate if it seems to stick, that there may be a top screw as well. And they are self-capture, so you don't have to remove them. You just need to loosen them out. So we've gone ahead and removed them from this panel just for this video to make it simple. Okay. At that point, we can go ahead and remove our back plate, okay, and expose the inside of our 2GIG Edge panel. Okay. So here we've got our backup battery, we've got our terminal block as well as a couple of things. Cell SIM card, third hand strap to make it easy for hanging up the panel on the wall. Now this we're doing in a desk situation, not an actual wall installation, but this is just for demonstration purposes to show you where to properly wire the power terminals. Now one of the things I want to point out is on this 2GIG transformer. Now the 2GIG Edge transformer is the same one that's used on our GC2 and GC3 product lines. It's a 14 volt DC transformer. Okay, so it is polarity sensitive. As you'll note, we do have a positive and negative terminal. So you do need to make sure you pay attention to that when wiring up. Also, you want to pay attention to your terminal blocks. We have several terminals on our terminal block, and we'll talk about those here momentarily. Let's go ahead and start by wiring up the transformer. So I always like to use red for positive if I have two colors of wire, but depending on your wire choices, you may not have that option. So just make sure you pay attention to which lead you tie to positive and which you tie to negative, as these are polarity sensitive. So first I'm going to go ahead and make sure my first screw terminal is secured. And with that, you want to make sure that it's got a good bite on that wire so it doesn't come loose. This will also affect things like how the wiring works when it's running over longer wire runs. That way then you make sure you get the correct voltage actually reaching your panel. So make sure you get a good secure attachment to those wire leads when attaching them to the transformer. Personally, I like to loop mine, as you may have noticed in my video here. That's something I like to do just to make sure that they get a good bite on that screw when tightening down. And that way then the screw terminal gets a good contact with all the copper wires, since I'm using stranded wire. Okay. Alright, got those nice and tight and secure. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and take my two wires here, straighten these out just a bit, but I'm going to run these through the back of the panel here, back plate. Okay. So if this was sitting on a wall, I would have ran these wires in wall and had them coming out through the back plate. At this point, what we're going to go ahead and do is go ahead and wire these up to the terminal block. Now before I start going into the terminal block, I do want to zoom in here just to show you one thing. So we're going to zoom in on the terminal block here. Here we have our terminal block. Okay, you'll notice several terminals. So we've got your battery connector located here, as well as your hardwired zones, your bell outputs, as well as a ground and a DC positive out. Now I want to point these top two terminals right here out to you guys just to point out one thing. These are not the power terminals. So once again, I say it again, these are not the power terminals. These are power output terminals. So these are designed for powering the XCVR3 for the Alarm.com image sensor. So power does not connect to this side. Okay, so that ground and DC out are not to be connected to the 14 volt power. Be aware that if you do connect power to these terminals, input power, you can damage the panel. So please do not connect power to these terminals. The terminals that we are going to be connecting power to are going to be our DC positive and DC negative in. So you'll notice it labeled the DC in. Okay. We also have a barrel connector option as well. For this purpose in this video, we are going to be using the DC in positive and DC in negative. And it's very simple, like we mentioned before. follow your polarity settings. Okay. So earlier I connected my red wire to positive, so I'm going to end up connecting my red wire to the DC in positive on the panel here. Now remember, before I also mentioned that the screw terminals are pretty small and you want to make sure you have a small flathead screwdriver to be able to turn in on these terminals. So I'm going to go ahead and put my red wire in real quick, or my positive, and get this one secured. Alright, once that's secured, I like to give just a gentle tug. The other thing to keep in mind too is you don't want to over tighten these terminals, okay? For all you really like to wrench on them or use a drill, I do not recommend it. So make sure you just use a hand turn, give it a good tight adjustment to make sure that wire is secured. Next we'll go ahead and connect our negative terminal here. And just like before, give it a couple turns, make sure the wire is secure. Like I said, not over tightening. As you can see, I'm just using my fingers here to turn the screwdriver, not grabbing it with a full handful, giving it a tight turn, just to make sure it's secure. Okay. At this point, I can go ahead and plug in my backup battery. Now, one thing you will notice is when you plug in your backup battery on the edge panel, it will power up. On our previous panels, this would not power up. At this point now, I am just making sure I don't have any excess wire sitting in there. The other thing you want to note or pay attention to is your wire routing. Okay, you notice we have several items in here on the back plate. You've got your SIM card, you've got some attachments here for the main screen on the other side. So you want to be very careful when you route your wires, especially for those using the 22 gauge. If you're doubling up pairs, I always try and make sure that I route them between the terminal and the backup battery terminal. Okay, so the terminal block and the backup battery, and then kind of have them just freestanding outside of that. That way then when the back plate gets pushed down, it's not pinching anything or pinching any of the wires against anything. Okay, at that point I can go ahead and close up my back plate, and we'll turn the panel over here for a moment. Now you may have a tamper message or several other messages that may appear on there. So the other thing you'll note is that right now my battery indicator is showing that I have no AC power. So you'll notice that I have no power. But once I connect power, you'll notice a change in that. Okay? Notice the screen changed a little bit in brightness, and you'll notice that the plug icon will stay to a solid icon. At this point, you can verify that you've connected power properly to your 2 gig edge panel. For further assistance, or if you run into any additional problems, please reach out to our 2 gig tech support team for further help, or if you need an RMA. Thank you again for your time today, and thank you for choosing 2 gig.